Los Angeles, 1941. 20 soldiers went down a shaft beneath a warehouse. Only 13 came back up. What they found wasn't supposed to exist, and it might still be down there. The city buzzed with war fever that year. Sirens wailing day and night, bombers rolling off assembly lines like toys from a factory. But the army found something else. Something buried, a shaft beneath a warehouse near the tracks. They sent good men down to look, men who followed orders, men who didn't ask questions. The tunnels they found weren't made by human hands. Smooth walls, strange carvings, bones scattered in the dark like dropped ice. Then came the scrape of claws on stone. Lanterns shook in trembling hands. Rifles came up fast, and green eyes opened in the black. It wasn't a patrol anymore. It was a trap. Most of those 20 soldiers never made it back to daylight. The few who did swore an oath of silence, because what lived under Los Angeles violated every law of nature. And the worst part? It's still there. Before we go deeper into this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button for Battleground Times. We bring you the military encounters they don't want you to know about. And drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your support keeps these stories alive. Thanks. Now let's go back to 1941. The city ran hot that year, like a motor with a cracked belt that won't quit. You could smell it everywhere. Oil and hot tar mixing with sea salt from the coast. Women stood outside factory gates wearing scarves and bright lipstick, waiting for shift change, waiting for news. Men in coveralls smoked hand-rolled cigarettes and spat on the ground. Then they went back inside to build wings. Metal wings for bombers and fighters, things with teeth made of rivets and steel. War was coming. Everyone knew it. You could hear it like a slow freight train miles out, getting closer every day. We drilled at the armory 6 days a week. March up the yard, march back down, eat in the mess, clean our rifles until the barrels shined, sleep when they told us to. The radio barked orders constantly. News from Europe. Fires spreading across cities we couldn't pronounce. Hawaii was just a rumor back then. A rumor of heat building somewhere in the Pacific. Our trucks wheezed along Alameda Boulevard every morning. The depot yard shined like it was sweating under the California sun. Air raid drills started happening at night. Sirens moaning through the streets like the whole city had a fever dream. We'd kill the lights on command, pull down the blackout shades, then stand there peering up at empty sky. Half the town was convinced a German Zeppelin would drift in from the ocean, just float right over Hollywood and drop hell on the movie studios. I was a corporal back then. Not much to boast about. I was good at keeping time, and good at keeping my mouth shut. My name doesn't matter anymore, but the names of the men I lost, those matter. I still count them on bad nights. Their faces hang in the dark behind my eyes like lanterns swinging in a tunnel. Top ran our line. He was built like a bulldog with a busted ear. He called us knuckleheads and motherless goats. But he'd slip us extra rations when he thought nobody was watching. Our lieutenant was fresh from officer school, a butter bar with clean boots and soft words. But he had a spine made of steel. More importantly, he listened. That's rare in the Army. I liked him for that. Reloaded crates all day, checked fire extinguishers and hose reels, inspected gas masks that smelled like rubber and fear. We listened to rumors dressed up like facts. U-boats spotted off the coast, saboteurs working in the canneries, grease smeared on stairs, nails hammered into truck tires, the usual paranoia of a nation preparing for war. What wasn't usual came in a plain manila envelope. The paper felt expensive, smooth, heavy. The words inside were chosen carefully. The stamp said it came from the engineers, not the regular engineers who build bridges and dams. The other ones, the ones who ask you to go somewhere quiet, the ones who tell you not to bring a camera. The order was simple on paper. Support a site survey beneath a warehouse near downtown. Bring lanterns. Bring rope. Bring the kind of men who don't chatter about what they see. We were soldiers. When you tell a soldier to go down a hole, he goes down the hole. You tell him to dig, he digs. You tell him to forget what he saw, he forgets. That's the job. That's what they pay you for. A cold wind came off the Los Angeles River that morning. The sky hung low and gray. You could smell rain mixed with the sharp scent of electric wires. Our trucks rolled east through a neighborhood of brick buildings and broken windows. The warehouse sat on a nameless side street near the railroad tracks. No sign on the building, just a locked chain-link gate. A blue sedan with government plates waited under a lean-to roof. A man in a dark suit watched us from the shadows, standing there like a bored cat watching mice. Inside, the warehouse floor was just dusty concrete. You could see marks where old crates had sat for years. Rat droppings scattered everywhere, like black pepper. In the far corner, someone had laid down newer boards, and in the middle of those boards sat a steel ring bolted into the floor. The ring was maybe 6 feet across. A draft came up from below, slow and steady like something breathing. It smelled strange, like the ocean at low tide, and something else underneath that. Sulfur, burned matches, rotten eggs. It made your nose scrunch up. We looked at each other, but nobody said anything. The man in the suit finally spoke. "Thank you for coming, gentlemen." He didn't tell us his name. He never did. He said they'd found an old tunnel during a building remodel. Said the city was full of old tunnels, bootlegger runs from Prohibition, service conduits for water and gas, flood channels cut by workers who didn't want wet boots. He smiled when he said it, but his eyes didn't smile. He said the engineers wanted to look around. Could we please be the muscle? Top rolled his thick shoulders. "We can be whatever you pay us to be," he said. The suit looked at our lieutenant instead. The lieutenant nodded once. "We'll go see what's down there," he said. So we geared up right there on the warehouse floor, rope coiled over shoulders, lanterns checked and filled with oil, carbines loaded, a couple of shotguns distributed to the bigger men, the radio strapped to a man's back. We checked our knots and belts. Someone cracked a joke with a flat voice. Nobody laughed. There were 20 of us, give or take, men whose names I still see carved on headstones in my mind. Daniels, Lee, Peralta, Nick the cook with the busted thumb, who could skin a rabbit in under a minute, Big Louie from Nevada, who never lost a wrestling match, my friend Harlan, who wrote letters home in tiny, neat print, who never swore in front of a church, reset chocks under the truck wheels, double-checked our bootlaces. Then we stood around that hole like kids at a swimming pool. None of us wanted to be first, but we all knew we were going down. Before we dropped into that shaft, the whispers started. There's always whispers before something bad. The security guard posted overnight said he'd heard scraping sounds. He said it sounded like someone dragging a rake over a slate floor. He said he saw a shadow move across the wall, move like it had a mind of its own. Then it just stopped. The foreman who supervised the remodel had his own story. Said his crew refused to come back after they pried up the first boards. They'd found a skull down there. He said it looked old. Then he said it looked wrong. When someone asked him what he meant by wrong, he wouldn't explain, just shook his head and walked away. In the mess hall the night before, one of the cooks told a story. Said the newspapers, back in the 1930s, ran articles about some local crank. Guy swore there was a whole city under Los Angeles, talked about gold and ancient maps, even claimed there were lizard people living in catacombs. Everyone at the table laughed. The maps were supposedly shaped like an owl. The cook waved his fork in the air and made hooting sounds. Men threw bread at him. But I noticed something. He wasn't laughing when he washed plates later that night. I saw his hands shaking in the soapy water. Some stories stick to you like burrs on wool. You can't brush them off. Our lieutenant didn't believe in stories. He wore truths like a jacket, snug and plain and practical. But even he kept staring at those floorboards, like he could feel something humming under his boots, like he heard something the rest of us couldn't. He had a habit of rubbing a coin in his pocket when he was thinking. You could hear it sometimes in quiet moments, soft clicking of metal on metal ridges. He said it was a lucky dime. His father gave it to him when he left Kansas for the Army. I used to watch that hand. It told me which way his mind was turning. We had a sergeant from Oklahoma who'd done river work before the Army. He squinted down at the shaft with professional interest. Said the steel ring was new, maybe a few months old, but the hole itself, that was old, ancient old. He spat tobacco juice on the floor. Said the draft coming up meant there was a long run of open space below. Maybe a bigger chamber somewhere deep. He said we'd know more once we dropped down and took a look. There were pigeons nesting in the warehouse rafters. Dozens of them. They rustled and shifted and watched us with bright, stupid eyes. One bird hopped toward the edge of the hole, tilted its head and peered down into the dark. Then it flapped away fast. Its wings made a hard panic sound. Some of the men noticed. They didn't say anything, but they noticed. Men notice more than they admit. I pulled my straps tight across my chest. My palms were already sweating. I told myself it was just a hole in the ground. I'd been in holes before. Basements, storm drains, crawl spaces under buildings. I told myself to breathe like the chaplain taught us, in through the nose. Hold it out through the mouth. I tasted salt and dust on my tongue. Someone coughed. Someone else laughed too loud. The radio hissed static and then settled into silence. "All right," Top said in his gravel voice. "Enough standing around gawking. We go down. We take a look. We come back up. No hero moves. No wandering off alone. You see something strange. You call it out. You don't poke it with a stick." "Clear. Clear," we said. Our voices sounded small in that big empty warehouse. Then we went down into the dark. Lanterns swung and made the walls seem to breathe. Rope glided through sweaty palms. The shaft had been cut clean. Not some amateur hack job. The stone was smooth with rings carved in it, like someone had cut a throat for a giant to swallow through. And I say stone, but it wasn't exactly stone. Some sections looked poured, like melted rock that cooled inside a mold. You see that in lava tubes sometimes. I saw a picture once in a magazine. Same skin. Slick and shiny in places. In other spots, the walls were etched with lines and swirls, patterns like fingerprints, but too big to fit in a human hand. We climbed past the warehouse smells, oil and mouse piss and mold, down into air that didn't belong to our world. It held water and metal, eggs and something ancient, something that had never seen sunlight. We reached a landing maybe 6 feet wide. The shaft continued below into deeper black, but there was a cut in the sidewall. A hallway waited there, black as a mouth that won't close. We stepped onto the landing and held our breath without meaning to. The lantern light showed walls that weren't brick. They weren't sewer pipe either. No seams anywhere. No rivets or joints. Just a curve that met itself like the inside of a bowl turned wrong. The floor had a faint pattern scratched into it. More lines and spirals, like something crawled there when the rock was soft, left its path behind like accidental art. Harlan whispered close to my ear, "This ain't no utility tunnel." Lee whispered back from somewhere in the dark, "Then what the hell built it?" Top's voice came low and final. "More importantly, what's in it now?" We moved in a column formation. The radio man stayed in the middle where we could protect him. The lieutenant walked point. I shadowed his right shoulder like I was trained. Our boots made damp thuds on the floor. The sound died fast, swallowed by the curve of those impossible walls. We walked for what felt like an hour, probably just minutes. Time got slippery down there. No wind, no motion except our own steps, just our breathing and the soft tick of lantern mantles burning oil. Now and then we saw marks on the walls, scratches that weren't made by any shovel or pick. I'd call them claw scores if I believed in claws that big. 3 lines together, deep gouges. The edges caught the lantern light and threw it back like little mirrors. At one bend in the tunnel, we found bones scattered on the floor. Not many, just a handful, laying there like white teeth someone spit out. They were old, crumbly when you touched them. Some were long and thin like arms or legs. Others were blunt and thick. Something had chewed on them. The ends were shiny and hollow, tooth marks visible even in the bad light. "It's probably a dog," Nick the cook muttered, "or a big rat." Nobody argued with him. Nobody believed him either. The smell of sulfur got thicker as we went deeper. Our eyes started running, the hair under my nose curled up, the radio on the operator's back clicked and popped, like it had ants crawling through the circuits. "Keep it close," I whispered to him. He nodded with his jaw clenched tight. We came to a fork where the tunnel split. One arm curved left, one curved right. The floor here had a depression in it, like a bowl someone carved on purpose. There was a dark stain in the bottom of that bowl. The lantern made it shine. Not wet exactly, just slick. Men stepped around it careful. Nobody wanted to put their boot soles in that mark. We didn't say why. A scraping sound came up from the right-hand tunnel. Not loud, not close, like someone dragging a rake way down a long hole. The whole column stopped moving. The scraping stopped too. We waited there in the silence. It started again after a full minute. A little closer this time. The left-hand tunnel gave a soft breath, like something exhaled a long time ago and forgot to finish. Left, the lieutenant said. His voice was steady. We went left, moving slow and quiet. Another landing opened up. This one overlooked a drop into nothing. The lantern light fell down there and found no bottom. Just kept falling. Something moved in that void. The light ran off it like water off glass. You ever shine a lantern on something slick and it throws your face back at you in broken pieces? It was like that. The scraping picked up again behind us. Same distance as before. Like whatever made it knew how to keep the perfect space between us. Eyes up, Top said quietly. We're not alone down here. We already knew that. We'd known it since the first breath of sulfur hit our noses. We passed carvings on the walls. Not just smooth stone anymore. The walls held shapes. Spirals and circles. Knife-edge lines stitched together into something that looked almost like writing. Not letters from any alphabet I knew. More like maps you couldn't fold. Some marks seemed newer than others, like someone had freshened them with a tool, made the grooves sharper than time would. I saw something in one swirl that stopped me cold. A figure drawn simple like a child would draw it. 2 legs, 2 arms, long head, mouth like a beak opening. I blinked hard. The lantern danced. When I looked again, it was just lines, nothing more. My tongue tasted like I'd been sucking on a penny. My palms were slick with sweat. The scraping sound got closer. Then it stopped completely. We reached the chamber. The chamber spread out in a wide circle. The ceiling arched high, like a church with the steeple ripped off. Columns rose around the edges, like trunks of ancient trees turned to stone. The floor had that same ring pattern we'd seen before. And in the center stood something low, like an altar, or a table. It was made from the same not-rock material. The top was carved all to hell. Grooves and cuts so deep you could lose a finger if you got careless. We made a defensive ring without anyone giving the order. Lanterns held up high, rifles angled outward, breathing slow and controlled. The radio man knelt down and checked his equipment. "I still got you," he whispered into the microphone. A graveyard hiss came back to the speaker. No voice, just static. He shrugged with small movements. His eyes looked too big in the lantern light, like a rabbit's eyes. Then 3 shapes stepped out from behind a column. I didn't count heartbeats. I counted the seconds between our breaths. There weren't many. They were tall. 7 feet, maybe 8. Hard to say when your brain is trying to crawl out through your ear. They were shaped like men who forgot how to be men. They had shoulders and a torso, 2 arms and 2 legs. But the proportions were all wrong. Too long here, too heavy there. The skin looked like rock that remembered being a lizard once, covered in scales that caught the light. Threw it back in wet chips of reflection. Their eyes were the worst part, like a snake's eyes, but set forward like a hunter's. Vertical slits, brighter than any lantern. A green glow that wasn't exactly light, more like life showing through. Their mouths were wrong too. Not like a crocodile's snout, more like someone took a man's mouth and pulled it back to the ears, then packed it full of knives for teeth. One of them tilted its head, the way a coyote does when it hears something you don't. They hissed, not loud, a low gutter sound that rolled in their chests. Our lantern flames flickered, like that hiss sucked the oxygen right out of the air. The lieutenant didn't scream, he didn't freeze. He did exactly what he was trained to do. "Weapons ready," he said, very calm, like he was on a practice range. Then he said one word, "Fire." We fired. The room stuttered with muzzle flash. Lightning painted the columns in strobes of white. Rifles cracked like dry boards breaking. The nearest creature lunged at us. It moved fast and strange, like a film reel cut wrong and spliced back together. 1 second it was near a column. Next second it was near my face. I fired again, point blank. The shot hit it square in the chest. The bullet sparked off its skin, made a sound like tapping on a bell. The creature didn't stop. "Jesus Christ," Peralta shouted. "It's bouncing right off." The shotgun did better. The first blast took a chunk off the creature's shoulder. A gray piece spun through the air, hit the floor and skittered away like a crab. The thing hissed again. Drew back a step. Not from pain exactly. More like surprise. Like we'd broken a rule it didn't think we knew. Then more eyes opened beyond the columns. Dozens of them. Maybe more. A slow bloom of cold green stars in the darkness. They watched us the way wolves watch a line of cattle at night. Patient, certain we'd make a mistake eventually, because we were made of mistakes. I remember the smell changing then. Deeper sulfur, something like crushed sage, and the warm copper smell of blood. It was in the room. I couldn't tell if it was ours yet. "Back," the lieutenant said. His voice cut through the chaos. "Back by teams. Stay in the light." We stepped backward, fired, stepped again. The creatures stepped too. They liked the edge of the light. They licked at it with those green eyes. They didn't like the shotgun much, but they didn't hate it enough to leave. The radio man spun dials with shaking fingers. He whispered into the handset, "Say again, say again." The radio spat back pure static, then a pop like a blown fuse. Something moved behind me. The hair on my neck tried to rip itself out of my skin. Harlan went down with a cry that got cut off halfway. One long arm, 3 thick fingers. Claws curved like black glass. The hand wrapped around him and hauled him into the dark between 2 columns. He kicked. He twisted. He swung his rifle like a baseball bat. The claws sank into his belly. Made a wet sound I'll hear until I die. He screamed once more. The sound ended sideways, like a door slamming on it. Then, nothing. I went for him without thinking. Top grabbed my belt from behind. "No," he said, soft but final. The kind of no that means you'll both die if you ignore it. I didn't ignore it. I'm a coward who lived to tell this story. That's worse in some ways. It's why I get to sit here and wish I couldn't. We saw a second man go down. Big Louie. He rushed toward the altar in the middle, like he thought he could tackle the problem. One of the creatures slipped left, very clean, no wasted motion. Swept its tail low and clipped Louie's legs out from under him. I hadn't noticed the tails before, but they had tails. Old reptile muscle that still remembered the ocean. Louie flipped hard, hit the floor still alive. Then he was gone, dragged into a side passage like someone pulled him on a rope. The lantern light, cut off after 10 feet, showed teeth and claws and an arm. Then nothing. "Move," Top barked. His voice was cracking. "Move now." We moved back through the tunnel we'd come from. The green eyes followed, floating in the dark like lanterns on a slow river. They didn't rush us, they didn't have to. We were in their house. The radio coughed. Finally a voice came through the static. Faint, like talking through thick wool. "Say your status." Faint, like talking through thick wool. "Say your status." The radio man's voice shook. Contact. Multiple unknown hostiles. "We are." The rest got swallowed by the tunnel. Bullets pinged off the walls, made angry bee sounds ricocheting. One of the creatures got bored of watching. Reached in like a man grabbing a fish from a bucket. It missed me by inches. The claws scratched the floor. Threw sparks like someone striking flint. We reached the landing by the shaft, formed a huddle, lanterns raised high in the center. The lieutenant counted heads out loud. 12, 13, 14. Then he stopped, looked around wild. "Where's Peralta?" His voice went up at the end. Peralta was gone. I hadn't heard him go. That's a bad thing to know about yourself. The dark can take a man, and you won't even notice. You're too busy keeping your own skin attached. You can make peace with that or not. I haven't. I just learned to sit with it, so it doesn't tear my face off every night. We hooked the rope fast, didn't bother with proper order or technique. We went up in a choking mass of bodies, boots kicking at the wall, belts snagging on each other, hands shaking so bad the rope burned our palms raw. The lantern flames wobbled and threatened to go out. Something climbed the wall below us. It moved like a gecko on glass. Smooth and impossible. I saw its face 2 feet from my boot. The face that shouldn't exist. I kicked without thinking. My boot struck that face hard. The sole slid on the scales at first, then caught on an eye ridge. The thing hissed like air escaping from a truck tire. It didn't fall. It just blinked. One long hand came up. Claws opened wide like a bear trap. Then Top leaned over the edge of the shaft, put his shotgun barrel right into the creature's mouth, and pulled the trigger. The creature's head blew apart. Not like meat and bone, like a clay jar struck with a hammer. Chips flew everywhere. Wet stuff splattered the walls in dark streaks. The body let go of the stone, dropped into the shaft below. It bounced once off the wall, made a sound I don't have words for. Just wrong. All the way wrong. Far below in the dark, something hissed back, louder this time, many throats answering the call. We reached the top, rolled onto the warehouse floor like fish thrown onto a dock. Gasping and shaking and staring at nothing, we lay there looking at each other with wild eyes. Did another head count out loud? 13. I won't name who was missing by then. If I say each name, I'll see each face. We'll be here all night with the lights turned low, and nobody will sleep. The lieutenant stood up slow. He moved like an old man, even though he was barely 25. Seal it, he said, not loud, like a prayer spoken in church. Seal it now. The engineers were already waiting by their equipment. They'd been ready the whole time. That's the part that tells you someone knew more than we did. The charges were already set around the shaft, placed there before we even went down. The suit watched us with a face like spoiled milk, pale and curdled. Wait, I said. I don't know why I said it. Maybe I thought the men we'd lost would find air if we left it open. Maybe I thought something wanted us to hurry. Make a mistake. The lieutenant didn't wait. He nodded once to the head engineer. Do it. They ran the detonator wire across the floor. We moved back toward the trucks outside. The suit covered his ears with both hands, ducked his head like the blast could erase what he'd seen down there. The charges went off like a car crash, but bigger and meaner. The floor jumped under our feet. All the pigeons in the rafters rose in a massive whoosh of wings, sounded like wind through a canyon. Dust came out of the shaft in a brown fountain that spread across the ceiling. We coughed and spat grit from our mouths. When the dust cloud finally thinned, there was no hole anymore, just a pile of broken concrete and twisted rebar. The steel ring bent like soft lead, useless now. We stood there listening. Dust settled on our helmets in a fine gray powder. Somewhere a pigeon cooed like an idiot bird that didn't understand. No sound came from below, except the sound you hear when you tell yourself you don't hear anything. But you do. The lieutenant looked at each of us one by one. His face was made of sharp angles in the warehouse light. We never speak of this, he said. Not a question. A command, not to anyone. Ever. He didn't add or else to the end. He didn't have to. We understood perfectly. The suit stepped forward then. Said it for him in a soft, pretty voice, like a man offering you a clean napkin at a fancy dinner. Thank you for your service, gentlemen. Like we'd just changed a tire for him. We left that warehouse with fewer boots marching than went in. It felt like the whole city noticed somehow. The street looked at us different. The sky looked at us different. Somewhere a siren went off. An air raid drill that wasn't on the schedule. We all flinched like dogs that weren't beaten, but knew what a stick was for. That's where most stories end. With the hole sealed, with the lies spoken, with the whiskey poured that night, with names crossed out and neat handwriting on official forms. But this didn't end there. We got 3 days of quiet after the sealing. During those days, the city acted like itself too hard. People laughed too loud at jokes that weren't funny. Women tied their scarves too tight. Men smoked their cigarettes too fast. The radio said words about Europe and ships and convoys crossing the Atlantic. The radio did not say anything about creatures under the city, because the radio never says what makes sense until it's way too late. The second night after we sealed the shaft, the guard posted at the warehouse called in a report. He said he saw lights in the cracks of the concrete pile. He said he saw green light, faint but definitely there. He said he heard scratching sounds, like nails at a door that won't open. He called the number the suit had given him for emergencies. The suit did not pick up the phone. Nobody came to check. The guard quit the next morning. The third night, a dog went missing from a yard in the next block over. Small terrier that barked at everything. The man who owned it found a smear in the alley behind his house. Looked like oil at first, but it wasn't oil. He hosed it down with water, used lye soap on it. The smear came back the next night. Same spot. That same night, a man who lived 2 streets over woke to a sound, like someone sliding a heavy trunk across his bedroom floor. He got up to look with a baseball bat in his hands. The trunk hadn't moved an inch, but there were marks on the floorboards, 3 long grooves, deep. He moved out the next day, didn't even say goodbye to his landlord, just packed a bag and left. Top came to our barracks in the dark that 4th night. He didn't light a lamp or turn on the overhead, just stood there in the doorway. "Pack light," he said quietly. "We got a call." The lieutenant was waiting by a truck with its headlamps covered in cloth hoods. He held a piece of paper in his hand. His shoulders looked carved out of soap, tense and hard. "We go back," he said when we gathered around. "Different access point, not the warehouse. There's a concern about the sewer lines nearby." "Those aren't sewers," I said. The words just fell out of my mouth. I didn't mean to speak. The lieutenant looked at me with tired eyes. "I know," he said. "We go anyway." We rolled out with 2 trucks that night. No stencils on the doors, no unit flags, just men in dull wool uniforms and boots that didn't squeak. We had more shotguns this time. Lessons learned in blood stick better than lessons from a manual. 2 men carried the big flame tanks on their backs. The flamethrowers. Burners, Top called them. He patted one like you'd pat a good dog, told the men carrying them to stand in the middle of our formation, like saints we'd protect. We didn't bring oil lanterns this time either. We brought battery lamps instead. The engineers said there were gases down there. Warned us a single spark could put us through the roof. The men joked about wanting to see the Hollywood sign up close. Nobody laughed out loud. We stopped near the Los Angeles River where it bent under a street. A locked iron door waited there under a bridge, hidden in shadows and rust. The engineer cut the lock with a tool that looked like a pistol that ate steel. He yanked the door open. A smell walked out to say hello. Rotten eggs and old coins and rain that fell 100 years ago. Inside was a service gallery clearly made by human hands. Brick and mortar, water drips that had their own calendar. The passage ran straight for a while. Then it sloped down toward a round mouth in the wall. "Old storm works," the engineer said quietly, like the brick could hear him. "Built on top of something older." "What's something?" Top asked. The engineer didn't answer. Either he didn't know, or he knew and preferred not saying. We moved down the slope in single file. The battery lamps showed rust on the iron bolts. Someone had scratched a name into the soot on the wall. "Lou loves Mama," with a heart around it. We stepped around puddles carefully. The water held oil colors that moved slow, made my stomach tilt sideways. At the round mouth, the brick construction stopped. The knot rock began again. That same impossible material. The curve of it ran smoother than any mason's work. The lines etched in the surface were deeper here. More of them. Like a story written on the walls in a language that predated words. A snake eating a snake eating a snake. Some of the grooves were filled with dark tar. It smelled like a funeral at sea. We heard the hissing then. Not our breathing. Not the hiss of our lamps. This came from down the throat of the tunnel. A breath in. A breath out, like something too big to fit in one body. "Lamps off," the lieutenant said quietly. "Sir?" Top whispered back. His voice carried doubt. "Off," the lieutenant repeated. "We killed the battery lamps." The dark swallowed us into its teeth. Our eyes went wide trying to find anything to see. Then we had something to look at. A green glow pulsed down the tunnel. On and off. On and off. Like a heartbeat that beats too slow. The glow didn't light the walls the way normal light would. It lit the floor in a broken pattern. Like light shining through a grate. Or through scales. Or through something with holes in it. The radio gave a little laugh of static. Like a child who wants to confess something. The radio man muted it fast. "On me," the lieutenant whispered. We followed that green pulse deeper. We saw murals carved into the walls. You could call them murals. They were carved first, then burned black with something hot, then carved again over the burn. Figures too tall for any doorway a man would build. Heads like helmets or crowns, eyes like almonds lit from behind. A river flowing where rivers don't go. A mountain. The sea rolling in and covering land. Little houses drowning in waves. Human stick figures drawn like jokes, like we didn't matter. The tall figures stood through the flood and built domes underground. They didn't drown when everything else did. Their hands had 3 fingers each. Each finger looked like a knife. I looked at that story carved in stone and felt sick, like I'd eaten a penny and it was rotting in my gut. They were here when the water came, I said out loud, when the water was where it shouldn't be. Top didn't answer. He didn't love ghost talk. He believed in 2 things only, gravity and orders. Sometimes the second one beat the first. Not always. We reached another chamber, smaller than the first one, lower ceiling that pressed down on your skull. The air moved just enough to make your lips feel like paper. In the middle of the floor sat a grate. The green glow came from beneath it. The holes in the grate were shaped like almond eyes, hundreds of them. The light pulsed up and you could see down a little bit. Something moved below, slow, a roll and a flex, like breathing. I don't know what we looked at, a machine that was an animal that learned to be a machine. The heat coming off it licked our cheeks, made sweat run down our spines. To the left, an opening breathed cold air. To the right, a narrow slit took the green light and turned it into a blade. The lieutenant made his hands talk when his mouth wouldn't. He pointed left, pointed at 2 men with a burner, pointed at me and Top to take point. We slid along the wall like crabs moving sideways. The scale of everything drove me crazy. You could feel how wrong the measurements were. Too big by inches in some places, too small by a hair in others. Made for something standing upright like a man, but never was a man, never would be. The hissing came again, closer now. Then we saw eyes crawling along the wall, like jewels on a necklace. The nearest head slid into view from behind a curve. I told my hands to bring the rifle up. They obeyed, but too slow. The creature came for me with the kind of quiet run cats use when they mean murder. Top hit it with the burner. The flame looked weak at first, like someone's cigarette lighter in a high wind. Then the fuel tank coughed again, and fire ate the room whole. It licked the ceiling, rolled down the walls, found the creature's skin and fell in love. I smelled burning meat and tar and old fish all at once. The creature shrieked. It wasn't like any sound I'd ever heard from an animal. It had words in it, shapes of words. It seemed to say something like, "Stop," in a language older than English. Then its mouth melted, and the words became just heat and smoke. They didn't like fire. That was the first rule we learned that night. We also learned the second rule fast. Fire made them angry. They came through the narrow slit like smoke turning into bones. 3 of them, then 5, then 7. My count broke and ran away screaming. The other burner team lit up. The men behind the fuel tanks screamed from the heat, but they kept pouring fire into the tunnel. Rifles cracked in the enclosed space. Shotguns boomed and echoed. The air went gray with ash and white with chemical smoke. The floor grew slick with something we didn't want to identify. The grate in the center of the room glowed brighter, like the thing below wanted to watch the show. One of them grabbed a burner operator by his fuel tank. Claws sank deep into the metal. The man screamed but didn't drop his equipment. He was a good soldier to the end. He held that wand steady, kept feeding fire into the face of the thing choking him. The creature's flesh blistered and popped like mud in a hot frying pan. The smell came back worse than before. The man sagged in the harness, slid down. The tank stayed in the creature's claws like a trophy. The creature lifted the tank to its mouth, bit down. Teeth met metal. The tank ruptured. You have never heard a sound like that. The room tore itself apart. Heat went through me like a ghost and took my breath with it. I hit the ground on my back. watched sparks eat the air where I'd been standing. The skin on my cheek bubbled for one horrible second, then settled back down. All the battery lamps blew out at once. The only light left was green from the grate below, and the dying orange glow of the other burner lying on the floor like a dying snake. The lieutenant came to the smoke like a man walking in a dream. He grabbed my collar with both hands, hauled me upright. "Up," he said. His voice sounded far away. His hair was singed short on one side. His eyebrows were completely gone. He smiled and looked like a skull. "Up now, Corporal." We ran. The tunnel we ran through had no right to be there. It wasn't on our sketch map. It sloped upward at a steep angle. The walls grew tight around us, brushed my shoulders on both sides. The green glow faded behind us, left only the memory of heat and burning flesh. The hissing didn't follow right away. Not immediately. It had other work to do first. It had men to finish. Men I left behind in that chamber. That sentence sits in my mouth like a hot coin. Burns every time I swallow. We reached a small room with no carvings on the walls, just smooth knot rock with a dome for a ceiling. In the center, a pillar grew from floor to ceiling. Like a stalagmite that finally got promoted after 1,000 years. It had holes where hands might go, grips carved at specific heights. That's how we found the secret of it. You put your hands in those holes and pulled. The pillar turned like a wheel. A section of wall slid aside with a grinding sound. That's the kind of door you make when you have forever to build it. The opening behind the wall led us up into cold air. Fresh air that stung our burned lungs. Not a warehouse this time. Not the river. A service crawl space under a hospital. White tile above our heads. Little green tiles under that in a checkerboard pattern. The crawl space stank of disinfectant and old breath and sick people. We heard shoes squeaking on linoleum above us, the roll of a metal cart. A soft cough. Normality so strong it physically hurt. We crawled forward on hands and knees, came up into a laundry room where a woman in a white dress folded sheets. She didn't scream when she saw us, just put one hand on her heart. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph," she said. Very calm, like she saw hell-burned soldiers every day. "You boys look like hell itself." We did. We were gray men with charred edges, ash in our hair, blood on our hands. We walked out through a side door without saying a word to her, found an alley and gulped air like drunks. Over the city, sirens went off again. Not a drill this time. Wrong time of day, wrong time of the sound. People poured into the streets, looking at the sky with worried faces. I looked down at the curb instead. Saw 3 long scratches in the concrete. I ran my finger along one, smooth as glass, fresh, new. We went back that same night with more men, with concrete mixers and steel bars. We sealed the hospital crawl space. Used enough concrete to build a bunker. We used steel reinforcement bars, thick as your wrist. We used a prayer, too. That's not a joke. The chaplain came and said words with Latin in them. Old words that were supposed to mean something. The concrete set like a good lie, hard and permanent looking. But the city was a block of cheese now, with a family of mice living inside. Seal one hole and they just use another. We didn't sleep for weeks after that. We walked in pairs, in 3s, in 5s when we could spare the men. We checked pump rooms and bell towers. Basements full of mops and cleaning supplies. We found marks sometimes. Claw grooves running up the inside of a support pillar. A smear on a wall where nothing should leave smears. A smell like warm iron in an empty field after rain. Once we found a man who had been a man. He lay behind a stack of crates at a warehouse. He was empty inside. That's the only way I can say it. He had all his pieces, arms and legs and head. But none of what makes those pieces work together. None of the hum. We never learned his name. I gave him mine for 1 day so he wouldn't be alone in death. Then I took it back, left him with a tag that read John Doe. I thought about how cruel the world is to men who get no story. The newspapers were full of something else by then. Hawaii had burned. Ships sunk in the harbor. Men burned alive in their bunks. War stopped being a rumor and became the only thing anyone talked about. That was luck, if you want to call it luck. The city could scream at the sky instead of at the ground. We had cover for what we were doing. We had chaos to hide in. It's easy to hide monsters when everyone's looking up instead of down. Then came the night they called the Battle of Los Angeles now. The night the coastal batteries woke up and shot at nothing. Some men will tell you it was weather balloons, nerves and shadows on fog, mass hysteria. Ask me and I'll tell you different. I'll tell you about the ground shaking that night, like something huge rolled underneath the city. I'll tell you about eyes on the bluffs near the batteries, green eyes that glowed and then went dark. We stood on a roof near the river that night, watched tracers climb into the sky and arc down. The city lights went off block by block. The sirens made their long, lonely wail. I felt the shape of the tunnels under my boots, like veins under skin. I felt a pulse coming up through the concrete. The roof had tar bubbles that popped in the heat, smelled like a road in August. I wanted to lie down face first in that tar, tell it I was sorry for what we'd done, for what we'd woken up. The lieutenant joined me at the edge, handed me a cigarette even though he knew I didn't smoke. I took it anyway. He lit it for me with steady hands. "They're not in the sky," he said quietly. "Just stated it as fact. They're under us." "I know," I said. Smoke burned my throat. "We're going back," he said. "We can't keep plugging holes forever." "How many men?" I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. Enough. Enough meant 20 men again. New ones this time. The old crew was scattered, buried or transferred to other posts far away. Clean belts, the suit had said with that empty smile. New eyes that haven't seen anything yet. He'd smiled when he said it. I wanted to throw him down a shaft. Let the dark do what it does to men who don't deserve their faces. We didn't go through the warehouse. We didn't go under the hospital. The engineers had found another map. It looked like a plate of spaghetti someone dropped. "Here," the youngest engineer said, pointing with a pencil stub. "The old storm tunnel that never worked right. It intersects with their system, we think." The line on his map stopped, but he said the tunnel didn't stop on the ground. Just on paper, we entered through a culvert drained almost dry, the smell of old rain and rust, trash caught on a grate like a dead rooster's tail feathers. Rats watched us without any fear. They belonged down there. We didn't. The burners came with us again. Shotguns and rifles. Top carried a sledgehammer this time. "For luck," he said. "If the world won't break open for us, I'll help it along," he said. Patted the hammerhead. We moved like we'd learned. Slow and quiet. Eyes up and down and on the corners. Corners that shouldn't exist but did anyway. We listened for the scrape of claws. Heard it sometimes far away. Then heard nothing at all. That was worse. The old storm line narrowed and then widened, like a throat that didn't want to swallow but knew it had to. We came to a wall built where the city gave up, where some engineer decades ago decided the tunnel led nowhere worth going. The wall was old brick and mortar. We knocked on it with the sledgehammer. It sounded hollow, like someone trying to tell a lie. Top grinned with all his teeth. He swung hard. The first hit cracked a vertical seam. The second blow popped 2 bricks out clean. They clattered on the floor. After the third swing, mortar dust fell with a sound like a sigh. Behind that wall lay the familiar dark. The knot rock surface began again on the other side. We stepped through into immediate heat. Stepped into their world again. We had a plan this time. Not a good plan. But a plan is better than nothing. We go to the heart of their nest. That green-lit chamber with the grate, the heat engine or whatever it was. We plant charges on the support columns, get out fast, drop the ceiling on their heads, make them dig out like men if they wanted to keep living under our city. Maybe they'd dig. Maybe they'd decide the city above tasted like poison. Maybe they'd go back to whatever dried sea left them angry and forgotten. We moved faster than before. The carved lines on the walls grew thicker as we went deeper. They crossed and recrossed like a net meant to catch something. In some places, the grooves were filled with material that glimmered like mica. My skin crawled looking at it. I had the sick feeling that if I pressed my ear to the wall, I'd hear singing. A song not meant for human ears. The great chamber came into view ahead, that green glow breathing like a slow bellows. The heaters in our burner fuel packs ticked as they warmed. Sweat ran down my back in rivers. The lieutenant signaled halt with a closed fist. He pointed up at the ceiling, at the hinges of a trapdoor we hadn't seen before. Another exit. Another door in their maze. We didn't touch it. We'd seen too many of their tricks. He pointed at the center of the chamber, pointed at the man carrying explosive charges. The man nodded and touched the canvas pack like touching a cross. And then all the eyes opened at once. Not just a few eyes this time, all of them, all along the walls, all around the grate and the floor, from the ceiling and even the floor itself. It was like looking into the night sky and realizing every single star is staring back at you. The hissing rolled out from everywhere at once, made my fillings sing in my jaw. The lieutenant didn't say fire. He said something else. Hold. The eyes watched us. Hundreds of vertical slits glowing in the dark. He took one step forward, raised both hands with palms out, showed he was unarmed. Burners lower, he said quietly. Rifles hold but don't fire. His voice sounded thin in that vast space. Wrong somehow. But words do what they sometimes do. They change the air pressure. He spoke clearly. We will go. We will seal our side. Leave the city alone, and we leave you alone. The words hung there like smoke. Something came up through the grate then. Not one of the smaller ones we'd fought before. This was different. Bigger. It rose slowly like a submarine surfacing. A head without a proper neck. The proportions were all wrong. A crest like a crown made of ancient bone. Eyes set too high on the skull. It stared at the lieutenant first, then slowly turned to look at Top, then at me. I had the sick feeling you get in church sometimes, when you suddenly believe in God and you're not sure you want to. I wanted to fall down. I wanted to kneel. I wanted to empty my rifle into that face. I did none of those things. Just held my breath. Counted the dings in my rifle's barrel band. The thing made a sound. Not a hiss like the others. A layered voice, like wind pushed through reeds. If you've ever heard a canyon talk when a storm gathers, you know what I mean. I heard the shape of words in that sound. Old words, tired words that had been spoken when mountains were young. I heard this. We were here when your kind had gills. I heard this. You break our roof, we break your towers. I heard this. Go now. I don't know if those were the actual words. I know that's what I understood. What my brain translated from that impossible sound. The lieutenant lowered his hand slowly. He nodded once. A small movement, then he stepped backward. That's when the radio chose its moment. The radio pack on the man behind me squawked loud. Some officer somewhere talking about boats in the channel, telling us to scramble at once. The squawk knifed through the air like a blade. The eyes flared brighter. The thing from the grate turned its head fast, moved faster than anything that size should move. In stories, this is where someone does the brave thing, where a hero makes a sacrifice and wins a small victory. That's not how it went. The brave thing just got eaten faster than the rest. The burners lit up without orders. Top had already started pulling the radio man backward. The flame opened like a white flower blooming. The room went to war. The hissing turned to screams that had almost words in them. Claws hit stone and threw sparks. Teeth hit bone and made sounds I'll never forget. We fought like gamblers with rent due and nowhere to run. The demolition man ran toward the grate. He slapped charges onto the floor like a baker, slapped stove into pans. Worked fast with shaking hands. He looked back at me once. I nodded, covered him with rifle fire. Bullets that came from a place below my brain. Pure survival instinct. He finished the placement, pulled the detonator wire, yelled one word over the chaos. Go. We went. Running in hell feels like this. Heat in your back like a hand pushing you forward. Air that comes in, with knives attached, goes out with smoke. The taste of old copper pennies and instant regret. The sound of your friends behind you. And then not behind you anymore. You don't look back. Not because you don't care about them. Because you can't carry the weight of looking and carry the man both. Your body makes the choice for you. The demolition man fell at a bend in the tunnel. His boot slipped in a wet smear on the floor. He hit the wall face first. Teeth first, actually. A shape dropped on him from above. Claws first. His jaw opened to scream. The thing found his tongue before the sound could come out. The scream got cut in half. left there incomplete. I fired into its face until my rifle clicked empty. The magazine was done. The creature bled something the color of old motor oil. Thick and wrong, it didn't seem to care about the bullets. It cared when Top hit it with the sledgehammer, though. The sledgehammer did what a sledgehammer does best. It forgot there were scales in armor. Put all the weight of an angry man into one swing. All his hate and fear compressed into 16 pounds of steel. The creature's jaw shattered, broke sideways with a crack like green wood splitting. It staggered, kept moving toward us anyway. The demolition man didn't. He stayed on the ground. We reached the brick wall we'd smashed through earlier, poured out into the culvert like water from a broken pipe. The night air cut our lungs, cold and clean, like early winter. The engineer waited there with a detonator box in his lap, held it like a sleeping baby. He saw our faces and didn't ask questions. He just did what he was told to do. Closed the switch. The earth lifted under our feet. The whole culvert went bright white for half a second. A dull, deep boom rolled through the city, made every pigeon in Los Angeles rise at once. You've never seen so many pigeons in your life. Thousands of them. You've never heard a silence like the one that followed. When the boom finished its work and the city remembered it had a heartbeat, started beating again, we lay on the gravel next to the culvert, panting like dogs. We counted fingers and toes and arms, made sure all our parts were still attached. The lieutenant stood up first, checked our numbers, shook his head once, sat back down on the culvert edge, put his face in his hands. I'd never seen him break that rule before. Officers keep their faces on. That's what they're paid for. He let it slip for just a minute, let us see the crack where the light got out. Then he put the mask back on. We left. We sealed everything we could find. The suit shook our hands with just the corners of his fingers. Like we were dirty. He said the right words. Wrote the wrong ones later on official papers. A gas pocket. A gin. Some men lost their balance underground. Some men always do. Nothing unusual. The city moved on. War took us after that. We scattered. Went east to the Pacific Islands. Went west to Europe. Some of us to jungles. Some to deserts. We carried our ghosts like we carried our field packs. You can set either one down for a while, but not for long. I saw men die in mud. Saw others burn. I slept with my eyes open more nights than I can count. I didn't forget those green eyes underground. Some nights I saw them in the knotholes of jungle trees. Some nights in a foxhole's black corners. Some nights in the barrel of my own rifle when I cleaned it. I put the rifle down eventually. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. When the war ended, we came back home. The city had new scars by then. New bridges, new highways, concrete flowing like a river that turned to bone. The old warehouses were gone. New ones took their place. Shinier. The hospital where I crawled out got a new wing added. The laundry woman retired. She raised parakeets. Died in a chair with a book in her lap. The river kept pretending to be a real river in its new concrete jacket. It never fooled anyone. Top died with a hammer next to his bed. He'd been fixing his porch steps at 80 years old. He kept that sledgehammer by his pillow every night for 30 years after the war. Said the weight helped him sleep. He laughed when he said it, then stopped laughing. Stared at me like a man hearing a train that hasn't come around the bend yet. The lieutenant made colonel, then didn't go any further. There are ways the world pays back men who tried to keep it honest. He got moved to a desk job, near a window that looked out at parking lots. He never got fat like most desk officers. Walked every day at lunch. Kept that dime in his pocket. Rubbed it so smooth you couldn't tell whose face was on it anymore. He never married. Died standing up, looking out a window on a day that smelled like hot rain coming. I worked regular jobs. Drank sometimes, but not always. Got married once. It didn't stick. I didn't keep anything that wasn't tied to me with wire, and even that wire rusted eventually. I sat through long nights with the radio on low, listened to baseball games. The announcer's voice had a good hum to it, soothing. I'd close my eyes and lay the diamond out in my head. Watch the game play out. I could do that and not see green eyes in the outfield grass. Then one year, the ground shook hard. Freeways fell down, houses tipped over. The news put numbers to it like they always do. A 7-point something, an 8-point something. Words that mean the earth moved and people died. The cameras showed a crack in the concrete down by the river. In that crack for just a second I saw a curve. Smooth, not rock. Etched with patterns. I saw 3 grooves beside it, long and smooth as glass. I turned the radio off. Went for a walk instead. You get old and you lose people. Lose them in words and weight. You come to an edge where the world has always been too big. Now it's finally a little too small. You find yourself wanting to go back to one bad place, just to see if it's still there. I walked to the old warehouse street one afternoon. The warehouse was gone. Just a parking lot now. A diner sat where the brick building used to stand. People ate pancakes where my men bled out. I stood by the glass window and looked at their plates. One of them looked up at me, smiled and nodded like I told a joke. The radio behind the counter played a song about summer, a song that didn't know what winter was. I kept walking, took alleys that smelled like bleach and onions, found a door under a bridge that had been welded shut a long time ago. The weld had crust on it like an old scab, but near the hinge there were scratches, 3 of them, new and smooth as glass. I put my fingers in those grooves. They fit perfectly, like finger holes in a bowling ball. If the bowler had hands too long for the lane, I heard something down there below. Not a scrape, not a hiss, a slow roll, like a sleeping thing turning over to dream better. I stood there a long time. The city moved around me, cars slatting past, jobs and bosses that were just clocks with different faces, little kids with lunch bags, their names written on them in marker. The sun came out like a man late for a date, one shoe untied, doing his best. Shadows went this way and that. The door was still a door. The scratches were still dark. My hand was still my hand. Shook only a little now. I set my palm flat on the steel. Not on the scratches, just on the metal. It was warm. Not hot. Just warm. Like something alive on the other side. I left, went home, put a glass of water on my kitchen table, watched the ripples. They were small, regular. They came and went like breathing, like the breath of something big asleep in the place under the place. Years turned around that table. The glass never stopped moving. Here's the truth nobody wants to hear. We didn't beat them. We were let go. Fire hurts them some. Noise wakes them up. Dropped ceilings buy you time, nothing more. So, if you hear scraping under your floor at night, don't move. If your dog growls at the basement door, listen to him. Don't open old drains. Don't go looking for things that don't want to be found. They're still there. Always have been. Always will be. We survived because they allowed it. That's the only reason I'm here telling you this story. So that's the end of our story from Battleground Times. If you made it this far, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and it's completely free. Drop a comment below telling us what you think. Have you heard scratches under your city? Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more encounters like this, check out the other videos on screen right now. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there. You never know what's underneath.